Good morning, Virgo. Welcome back, beautiful soul. Okay, so I want you to pause whatever you're doing for just a second because what came through for this one, I genuinely wasn't expecting it, and I think you need to hear it. There is a letter that was never written, words that formed somewhere behind someone's eyes, that traveled as far as their throat, and then stopped, held back by pride or fear, or the particular kind of paralysis that comes from not knowing how to undo what's already been done. And you have been living in the silence of that unwritten letter for longer than you should have had to. Let me tell you what silence does to a person who deserved words. It doesn't just occupy the space where the words should have been, it expands. It seeps into the corners of how you see yourself, how you interpret your own worth, how you begin to wonder in your quietest moments whether the silence was actually the answer, whether you were simply not worth the effort of an explanation. You were worth it. You are worth it. And what I want to offer you today is the letter that silence stole from you. This reflection invites you to consider how much of the story you've been telling yourself about what happened was written by their silence rather than by the actual truth of who you are. Because here is something that may be difficult to sit with, and I'm going to ask you to sit with it anyway. The person who ignored you, who hurt you, who chose distance over honesty and absence over accountability, they may not have been silent because you were insignificant. They may have been silent because you were the opposite of that, because facing you, really facing you, would have required them to face themselves. And that, for some people, is the most impossible thing in the world. If they could speak, if the walls they built around whatever they feel came down, just for a moment, it's possible the first thing they'd say is something that looks nothing like an apology but functions as one. Something like, I didn't know how to hold something this real without dropping it. Because some people have never been taught that. They've been handed intensity before and burned themselves on it. So when something genuine arrived, when you arrived with your particular depth, your particular way of seeing and feeling and being present, it's possible they panicked. Not because you were too much, but because they had never learned how to be enough. This reflection invites you to consider, is it possible that what felt like rejection was actually someone's private confession of their own limitations, delivered in the only language they currently know? I want to be careful here because understanding someone's limitations is not the same as excusing the harm they caused. You are allowed to hold both things at once: compassion for what may have been driving their behavior, and a clear eyed acknowledgement that the way they handled it was not okay, that you deserved better, that the silence, the distance, the hurt, none of it was something you earned. But here is where the confession gets complicated. Because if there are words they want to say to you, they may not only be words of remorse, they may also be words of longing, of something unresolved that sits heavy in them in the small hours, in the unexpected moments when a song or a street or a particular quality of light brings you rushing back. It's possible, not certain, never certain, but possible, that you occupy more space in their inner world than they have ever allowed themselves to admit. This reflection invites you to consider what would change for you Not in terms of what you decide to do, but in terms of how you carry this. If you knew that their silence was never really about your value, because that is the thing that tends to do the most damage, isn't it? Not the hurt itself, as real and as valid as that hurt is, but the meaning we assign to it. The way we let someone else's inability to show up become evidence of something being wrong with us. The way we absorb their confusion and carry it as our own verdict. Some people watching this have spent months, maybe longer, quietly editing themselves in the aftermath of this experience, making themselves a little smaller, a little more guarded, a little less willing to extend the kind of openness that made them vulnerable in the first place. And that makes sense. It is a completely human response to pain. But it may also be costing you something, something that was never theirs to take. Your openness, your capacity to feel deeply, your willingness to show up fully in the spaces you enter. These were never weaknesses, even when someone's inability to meet them made them feel that way. This reflection invites you to consider, what part of yourself did you begin to distrust after this experience that actually deserves to be reclaimed? If the letter existed, if it arrived somehow in whatever form letters arrive when people finally find the courage they couldn't locate before, it's possible it would end with something that isn't quite an apology and isn't quite a plea, something that sits between the two, something that says, I saw you, I see you, and I am sorry that I made you feel, even for a moment, like being seen by me wasn't worth something. You don't need that letter to heal. I want you to hear that clearly. The closure you've been waiting for it may never arrive in the form you've been imagining, and yet closure is still available to you. Not because they finally say the right thing, but because you decide quietly and completely that your peace is no longer dependent on their ability to deliver it. The power is yours. It always has been. Even here, even in this, even after everything that was done and left unsaid, they ignored you and they hurt you. And what they may want to say, buried beneath whatever fear or pride or confusion has kept them silent, is that it was never a reflection of your worth. Not eventually. It was always true from the very first moment and every moment since. Trust yourself with this. Your heart already knows the difference between what you were told and what is actually true about you. Before you go, I want to hear from you. What is one thing you wish they had said to you, the words you deserved but never received? And has this experience changed the way you show up for yourself? Drop it in the comments. This is a safe space, and I read every single one. See you in the next one. And listen, the silence they gave you was never your sentence, it was theirs.